It is good to see you. It's hard to gain people's reactions when we've got masks on, but I hope you're happy to be here too. As has been said, my name's Matt, and I count myself a friend of you guys. Well, 2 people have nodded. That's good. Thank you at the back there. That's good. I don't know if you've got on your shelf at home like a book that you go back to regularly. I've got loads of books like that are sort of favourite books. But there's other books that sit on my shelf that are kind of are important, but I don't read that often. And one of these is a book called The Day That America Told the Truth. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of this book, but it's essentially the results of a massive survey that happened. It was a survey done amongst 10,000 Americans, 1,800 questions across 50 different locations. And they compiled all the answers together and then wrote this book, in effect, to work out the real heart of America. Now, one of the sets of questions was, what would you do for $10 million? Some of you are already thinking right now, what would I do? 99% said that they would lie to their family and friends. 74% said that they'd give up their nationality and move to another country, never to return. 26% said that they would abandon their families forever. 23% said that they'd become a prostitute for a year. 13% said that they'd kill a stranger if they had no chance of getting caught. And 7% said that they'd kill a family member. Some of you are looking at your husband or wife thinking, I'll do it for a Mars bar. Certainly there were times with my brothers at home, I was like, you wouldn't need to pay me very much. But in some respects, we're kind of our jaws dropped. But what's the truth of our heart? I wonder what it would take to change us. I actually wasn't that shocked by the results. What really shocked me was that the survey revealed absolutely no discernible difference between those who identified as Christians and those that didn't. When anonymity was guaranteed, when it was just an answer on a bit of paper, the truth is, are we really any different than the average member of the public? The ethical conduct of a Christian should be different, but it doesn't seem to be. If you doubt me, just ask a teacher. Ask a teacher, because Christians are just as likely to commit plagiarism as non-Christians. They're just as likely to lie to get themselves out of trouble. And I'm trying to avoid the teacher's gaze in the room, but it's true. If you doubt me, just Google pastor caught in. You won't get pastor caught in Sainsbury's doing his weekly shop. You'll get pastor caught in extramarital affair or pastor caught in. Ask a Christian young person what their parents are like at home. And then ask the same parents what that ideal, perfect Christian teen is really like at home. And you begin to see, are we really any different? And just so you know, that book, The Day America Told the Truth, was written 30 years ago, in a time before social media, in a time before mobile phones could catch you out, where a member of the public is taking a photo of you, in a time where it was much easier to get away with it. So are we just hypocrites? Are we people who think we're different, who think we're special, who maybe think we're better, or even act as if we are, but in reality, there's no discernible difference between us and anyone else we might meet on the street? And the charge is that, we're exploring in this series why I'm not a Christian, and the charge is, well, are there people out there who aren't Christians because Christians are just hypocrites? Now, it's really important, I think, for us to actually define what hypocrisy is. Hypocrisy is not the disparity between who we are and who we long to be. And hypocrisy isn't even the gap between what we do and what we want to do. You know, everybody's life is in a process, whether you call yourself a Christian or not. Everyone. But hypocrisy is claiming to do one thing whilst doing another. It's theatre. It's for show. In fact, that's the root of the word hypocrite. It's all around the idea of theatre and performance and playing a part. Saying one thing but actually being something different. You know, a hypocrite is somebody who wants others to see them different. Perhaps holier, perhaps more special, perhaps more important than they actually are. And so what happens is we hide what's really going on in our lives. And you know what? That is the kind of behaviour that Jesus really struck out at. You know, Jesus saved some of his most scathing comments, some of his harshest criticism for the religious hypocrites of the day. Not just the religious people, but religious hypocrites. And some of those comments can be found in the book of Matthew, chapter 23. So we're going to have our reading now. I think.
Me glasses, right? Sure if I can. That's all right. So in Matthew chapter 23, verses 12, can you hear me? 12 to 16, and verses 33. So it's Jesus talking to the Pharisees and teachers of the law. For those who exalt themselves will be humbled. I can't see. And those who humble themselves will be exalted. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You shut the door of the kingdom in the kingdom of heaven in people's faces. You yourselves do not enter, nor will you let those enter who are trying to. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You travel over land and sea to win a single convert, and when you have succeeded, you make them twice as much a child of hell as you are. Woe to you, blind guides! You say, if anyone swears by the temple, it means nothing, but anyone who swears by the gold of the temple is bound by that oath. You snakes, you brood of vipers, how will you escape being condemned to hell?
Thank you. Okay. It's like he's a performer himself. That's good. Thank you. And you'll notice that actually kind of I missed out quite a few verses because it went on and on and on. Deliberately, Jesus was, woe to you, keep going at them. You might want to read it all when you get home. You see, Jesus reserves some of his harshest comments for people who should know different. This is where he's face to face with the religious leaders of the day. These Pharisees. And they should have known different, but they weren't. He says, look, you concentrate on making yourself look good on the outside, but inside you are ugly. And worse than that, he says, because you're lying about who you are, what that actually does is make it harder for the rest of the people. Because everyone else who was trying to follow God feels bad. Because they look at the professional religious people and go, well, I can't match them, so I'm never going to match God. And that's why Jesus was so harsh on them. Because it wasn't just messing up their relationship with God, it was messing up everyone else's too. And in fact, 7 times he launches at them with this, woe to you, teachers of the law, you Pharisees, you hypocrites. And he compares them to whitewashed tombs. which actually do look quite beautiful on the outside, but of course inside are just full of dead men's bones, and everything was unclean. And each woe to you that he goes into is a subtle attack on the heart of their actions. Now, he says, look, you teach people about God, but you don't love God. You preach God, but actually you're just converting people to a dead religion. You teach that an oath given in the temple is not binding. But if you give it with a little bit of money or a little bit of gold, well, then, of course, it is binding. He says, you teach the law, but you don't practice the heart of the law. You don't practice justice and mercy and faithfulness. You spend your time obeying the minutiae of the law, tithing spices and similar things. He says you present an appearance of being clean, but you're dirty inside. You're full of worldly desires. You exhibit yourself as righteous and being scrupulous, but instead that's just a mask. You have a high regard for the prophets of old. You think that you'd never have murdered them, but inside you're just cut of the same cloth. Now, of course, we can sit here and listen to this because Jesus is talking about the Pharisees. But is he talking about us? Now, it's really important to say that this isn't about messing up. This isn't even about sinning. Jesus can cope with that. It's not even about falling short of our own standards. Jesus can cope with that. What got Jesus so riled was the pretending that we are somehow different. That's what caused him to challenge them. You see, most people, Christians and non-Christians, have two value systems going on. What we say and what we actually do. Most people have that. It's not just reserved to Christians. So if the accusation comes, well, I'm not a Christian because Christians are just hypocrites, maybe there's a bit of a pushback by saying, well, aren't we all? Because we all have these sort of two value systems going. And actually, the path of a Christian is to somehow bring those two value systems closer and closer together until they eventually become one. The one that Jesus knows is best for us. As I've hinted already, hypocrisy is actually rampant in our society, not just the church. There's lots of people who claim to follow a moral system, a religious system, but make life decisions based on anything other than that system. Yes, of course, barely a week goes by without the story of another high-profile pastor who's fallen in some area. But the same is true for politicians. They say one thing and do another so often, we've almost given up expecting something different. Or sports stars who come out in some anti-drug campaign, and then a few years later you discover that their record was obtained by being on drugs. Or, as I've said, students who demand high standards, yet are caught plagiarizing time and time again. Or couples who want relational fidelity from each other, yet cheat at the first opportunity. You see, it's not just Christians who are hypocrites. Our society, our world is hypocritical. And you will never change hypocrisy by just changing your behavior. In fact, that's what the Pharisees did. You change hypocrisy by changing the heart. And that's something that Jesus is very good at. So as we move towards the end, of course it is a serious charge. Are Christians hypocrites? Well, first of all, I do have to say, yes, we are. At times we fail to live in the way that we know we should. You ask any Christian how God wants them to live, and they know the answer. Love your neighbour as you love yourself. How have we done with that today? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind and strength. How have we done with that today? The Ten Commandments even. You know, if I'm honest, my hand goes up, I break most of those every day. And I don't think there's a single Christian who could honestly say that they haven't. We fail. So on the one hand, yes, we are. But I also want to push back and go, no, we're not. Because Christians admit that they've failed to live God's way. At our heart, Christianity is that we have failed to meet God's standards and our own. That's the very definition, really. But perhaps the key to us understanding Christianity it's not about us succeeding or us being good enough or us meeting this standard. Jesus came for failures. A Christian is actually somebody who stops pretending that they're good enough and admits that they need some help. Now, of course, this doesn't excuse us from sin, from doing things that are wrong. God does call us to live by his rules. But the difference is that we know he's working on us. He is changing us. Becoming a Christian doesn't make us perfect overnight, but it should begin to change how we live. And the community of God, that's us here, the church, should be a challenge to each other. We should be pulling each other up, saying, hey, come on, we shouldn't be living like that. When hypocrisy begins to rise, it should be brothers and sisters who pull each other up. If you're in here for the first time, or if you're watching online, and you've somehow stepped away from church or Christianity because of the hypocrisy you see, I want to say I'm really sorry for that. And Christians should be better, but so should you. As someone once said, you know, if churches are full of hypocrites, remember there's always room for one more. You know, come with your hypocrisy too and join us. So as I end, perhaps 3 quick points to help us work on this hypocrisy thing in our lives. The first is this. Don't fix your eyes on others, fix your eyes on Jesus. You know, the truth is it's often easier to follow other people than it is to follow Jesus. We can get drawn in by somebody who's entertaining, or somebody who's charming, or somebody who's charismatic, or somebody who looks like they've got it all together. And it's easier to look at somebody else than it is to look at ourselves. And too often we're focused on other people and what other people think and other people's standards to live out what we truly believe. And yes, maybe we can point the finger and go, well, I'm not as bad as that guy. Because anything we could do to take the spotlight off ourselves is often what we choose to do. But if our actions aren't as a result of our heart, then our faith just becomes outward actions that mean nothing. And we become hypocrites. Making other people the standard just sets ourselves up for disappointment. The second thing is to learn to continually extend grace and forgiveness. I think we often fail to do this because of fear. We think we might be taken advantage of. Or maybe because of pride, because we think others don't deserve it quite as much as we do. Or maybe it's because we're hard on ourselves and we don't forgive ourselves when we mess up. Whatever it is, continue to extend grace to other people. Don't take on the role of the accuser. Maybe they already know and are being hard on themselves already. Keep your focus on God and remember that He's the standard. And finally, perhaps try and avoid judging others or labeling them. Oh, he's a. Oh, she's a. When we judge others, it can actually be very hypocritical. Because when we point the finger, remember that old saying that there are fingers pointing back at us. When somebody offends us, when somebody does something wrong to us, it's easy to launch into them and attack their character. But if we stopped and thought how often we'd done the same thing, it might just stop us from judging. So as I close, the truth is that yes, we are hypocrites, but we're being made into something different. Strange little verse, but it says, by a single offering, He's perfected for all time those who are being made perfect. As followers of Christ, you and I are perfect, yet are still being made perfect. I'm a failure, but I'm still loved by God. Christianity doesn't stand or fall on the way that Christians have acted throughout history. Christianity stands or falls on the person of Jesus. And Jesus was never a hypocrite. He lived consistently what he was taught, or what he taught. And at the end of his life, he actually challenged those who'd lived with him day and night for over 3 years. He said, point out any hypocrisy in me. And the disciples were silent because there was none. And that's the standard we need to look to. As I end.